Hello, my name is Matt Whitman, and today I'd like to talk about Nehemiah chapter 11, a chapter of the Bible in which a whole bunch of ancient descendants of Abraham living under Persian rule decided that it was time for them to repopulate their ancestral capital city of Jerusalem, even though kind of nobody really wanted to live there. And it seems like it wouldn't be that interesting a plot, but it's a pretty interesting plot because they've done all this work at this point in the Bible over the course of the better part of 100 years to put back together their way of life, their religious system. They rebuilt a temple in there somewhere. They barely staved off eradication at the hands of a vile genocidal maniac named Haman. And now they've just recently finished rebuilding the walls of this ancestral capital city of Jerusalem, but nobody wants to live there because nobody's lived there for a long time. It's not fashionable at this time. And also it's kind of a dump, and it doesn't have the reputation as being a place where you'd want to live. And the economy is all religious there. And the real way to advance your family's holdings is to move back to the parcels of land that your family owned hundreds of years earlier before a terrible conquest at the hands of Nebuchadnezzar, out in the hill country where families could recover their wealth and their reputation by rebuilding their agricultural lands and grand villas. And so moving to Jerusalem, though, sounds appealing because of the bright lights and the culture and all of the other cool things that you and I associate with happening in cities happening there. But it just wasn't fashionable at this point. It wasn't economically desirable, and it required some really forward-thinking people like Ezra and particularly Nehemiah, the guy for whom the book is named, to say, look, if nobody wants to move back in here, we're just going to have to draw lots if we have to. Every family is going to have to make a donation of some of their family members to come and set up an extension of their household in Jerusalem. All of these families are going to need to have a presence in this city if it is going to continue to be our ancestral capital city, and if we are going to sustain the temple and sacrificial system that is our point of connection to our God, if we are going to sustain our unique identity as a people, even as the waves of the empires of history ebb and flow across the centuries, if we want to keep that, we're going to have to populate this city, and we're going to have to populate it with people who can demonstrate that they are descended from Abraham and that they are part of this people and that they are part of this promise. But as I said at the outset of our conversation, today we're going to talk about Nehemiah chapter 11, which is a very important chapter in the unfolding of the Bible and in the unfolding of history in general. But it's a chapter that, as you read through it, doesn't feel super compelling because it's got a lot of names in it. And it's more or less just saying, for at least the first 2/3 of the chapter, these are the people who agreed either voluntarily or by the drawing of lots to go and repopulate this newly completed city of Jerusalem for the purposes of long-term goals that we were just talking about a second ago. So how do you handle a chapter in a podcast format like this that involves a whole bunch of names and where you might get bored? Well, I have an idea for that that's so crazy it just might work. I thought that maybe instead of reading this chapter to you, I could sing this chapter to you to the tune of I Am the Very Model of a Modern Major General from Gilbert and Sullivan's beloved 1879 operetta, The Pirates of Penzance. These are the provincial leaders who settled in Jerusalem. I'm just kidding. I don't have that kind of energy. There's a lot of words and the song goes very fast. And we already did this the other day. No, I've reconsidered. I'm just going to read it to you. These are the provincial leaders who settled in Jerusalem. Now, some Israelites, priests, Levites, temple servants, and descendants of Solomon's servants lived in the towns of Judah, each on his own property in the various towns, while other people from both Judah and Benjamin lived in Jerusalem. That was Nehemiah 11:3. And was that also 4? Yeah, it was also 4. Now, you notice there were a few different groups of people there we were talking about. Some of this is pretty straightforward. We've talked about a lot. Priests, the Levites, the temple servants, the descendants of Solomon's servants. These are all people who were a part of the religious rhythm. Of course, they're settled in Jerusalem. That's where the temple is. That's where all the religious stuff happens. We're trying to add other things to the equation. So naturally, those people are going to be there. But there are 3 ethnic people groups being mentioned here as well. That is, descendants of Judah, descendants of Benjamin, and Israelites. Now, the descendants of Judah and the descendants of Benjamin we would expect, because those are the people who make up the historic southern kingdom of Judah. You'll recall that the first king of the unified kingdom of the descendants of Abraham, that was Saul, way back in the day, pre-1000 BC. You will recall that his successor was David. It was a pretty rocky transition in power. And then you will recall that after a long and up and down reign from David that is mostly positively characterized in the Bible, his son Solomon took over, and Solomon was the final king of the unified monarchy, the unified kingdom. After that, the 12 tribes of Israel, who had been one kingdom, split into two parts, and 10 of the tribes go with the north. That becomes the kingdom of Israel. And 2 of the tribes, Judah and Benjamin, go with the south. That becomes the southern kingdom of Judah. The northern kings are depicted in the Bible as being completely morally bankrupt. They follow all of the customs and religious habits of their neighbors. They're a mess. They get into trouble all the time. And their kingdom is relatively short-lived. They lose to the Assyrians in 732 BC and are held out as being overwhelmingly lost to history. They get taken away into captivity, and they don't really seem to be brought back, at least as the Bible describes it. We don't get any specific description of them being repatriated, of them returning from their exile. They seem to disappear into the fog of history. Judah and Benjamin, on the other hand, they last a little longer until the southern kingdom of Judah is, as we've discussed many times, conquered by Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. Then the Babylonians lose to the Persians, and then the Persians very quickly are like, hey, people that got conquered by our predecessors can go back and rebuild things. And that's how we get into this whole post-exilic era that you and I have been looking at in Ezra and Nehemiah and Esther. There's no surprise here that the people of Judah and Benjamin are coming back to rebuild what is effectively the southern kingdom, the kingdom of Judah around Jerusalem. What is a bit of a surprise is that Israelites get mentioned here. Now, this point is not fleshed out very much in Nehemiah, but it is here. It's on the page. It looks like at least somebody, a few people from the now almost completely forgotten tribes of Israel who have been wiped off the map now for what are we at? I mean, going on 300 years they've been gone. So think about that. That would be the equivalent, as I'm recording this, of like the 1720s. So really a long time ago, these folks have been gone, but apparently a few of them could still produce the paperwork, which, remember, was very important to Ezra and Nehemiah. They were very guarded. So was Zerubbabel, who rebuilt the temple, about anybody coming in here and being like, oh, we have a claim to this thing, and not being able to prove that they were children of the promise God made to Abraham. But apparently the leaders were satisfied with what could be presented by this handful of Israelites who were around. And we don't get a list of who those Israelites were. I mean, we're going to get a list here of the descendants of Benjamin and the descendants of Judah and the priests and the Levites and even the gatekeepers. But then there's one more verse as we scroll ahead here to verse 20 of Nehemiah 11 that says, the rest of the Israelites with the priests and the Levites were in all the towns of Judah, each on his ancestral property. It's interesting, though, because the descendants of the Israelites, all of their ancestral property would have been in the north. But if you go and you look at a map of the satrapy of beyond the river, that is the Persian province in which all of this is happening, it isn't drawn neatly over the top of the ancient boundary markers of the divisions between Israel and Judah in the north and the south. The Persians drew the lines very differently. So it's true, the ancestral homelands of the ancient northern kingdom of Israel, anybody who was still somehow alive and had carved out some sort of continuous heritage from that time, their homeland would still be there within the boundaries of this province. But the author of Ezra and Nehemiah doesn't seem very interested in giving a whole bunch of details about that. And I think the reason would appear to be that the author of Ezra and Nehemiah, who looks to be Ezra, isn't real excited about how the Israelite kingdom, the northern kingdom of Israel, handled their business along the way. Yet also it looks like a dispensation has been made to say, okay, if you're still here and you can show that you are from the 10 northern tribes in some way, okay, well, you get to be a part of this thing, even though the text of the Bible doesn't talk about it very much. Now look, Ezra and Nehemiah are a book about the fate of the southern kingdom. These books hold the southern kingdom and the descendants of Judah and Benjamin out as being the standard bearers. These are the ones who were more faithful. These are the ones who came around. And so they're kind of the human heroes of the story, even though they're heroes who are very flawed and certainly not above criticism in the story. They're the ones who are repentant. They're the ones who are there. But still, I mean, it's kind of cool to see the Israelites who have been long gone as you're scrolling through the pages of the Bible, getting a little bit of screen time here. I don't know exactly who that was or what they did. I don't think there's a clear record of that. But just to see some little glimmer of redemption from what looked like a complete dead end, and it is only a glimmer, is really pretty cool. And what do you know? Nehemiah 11 took longer than I expected. I thought we would be done today. We're not going to be done today. I wasted too much time on the Gilbert and Sullivan bit. What have I done? Whatever. We'll get into the rest of Nehemiah 11 next time around. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. Let's do this again soon.